kind of roundabout thing. It's not really quite appropriate to you all, but it's part of the dialogue I think we're talking about, is when we look at these listings in magazines or online journals, and they're talking about what's going on in different parts of the country, it really upsets me when I do not see Louisiana listed. And I think it's a very layered, complex question. But I think when we're talking about this sort of dynamic, it's worthwhile to pose.
Yeah, that's back to the question of how can we use art criticism to advance the New Orleans art world to being a 21st century art center. So just throw it out again.
It goes back to this being an organic art scene rather than a big money art scene.
Okay.
And as long as we don't have a lot of big money stuff happening here, we're not going to be represented, because that's what those magazines are all about. It's all about advertising and the money, you know? So let's just have our own scene.
Yes, can we be both is the question.
I think so. I think efforts like, the Prospect International Biennials really help that. And also occasionally, because suddenly we became news, international news, and that was really good. And in a positive way, because you look at the reviews that came in from all over the world about Prospect One, some of the most people who hadn't said a single positive thing about an international biennial in ages really liked it, Maybe it was the novelty of a city that was all messed up, I don't know, but it was interesting. And I think that as long as we keep things happening here that are not totally predictable and that are a little bit more outside the box of the way the American art establishment thinks, then there's a chance of that developing into art news of some sort.
Yeah, I was going to say, to be fair, I don't think it's only the situation of the money in industries and blah, 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 because our experience at Prospect is that people are eager to hear what's going on in New Orleans. They want to know. We don't have to work that hard to get them to have interest in us. Even in the case of Prospect 1.5, that actually is about New Orleans artists, there's a great deal of interest.
I was going to attempt to be glib and say, well, they get to be in the magazines, but we get to have Mardi Gras. So we come out right. And I'm only half kidding. Walk around on Tuesday morning at Mardi Gras and look at the costumes, and it's like, wow, if you called that art, where is it any better? We draw lines. That's art, that's not.
I just want to throw out something that Maria Tizza Potruch said when she visited New Orleans, and she did a seminar at Louisiana Artworks, I believe, and she said, don't worry so much that you're not in New York or LA. Don't worry about, she said a lot of things happen in regional scenes. She said Berlin was a two-bit town where the rent was cheap, and the artists went there first. And it became a scene because the artists were there, and then the gallerists came, and then the critics came, and then it became Berlin. And I think about that a lot when I think about New Orleans, because we're at the genesis of that now, with the young artists flooding in and older artists flooding in, but people flooding in, artists flooding in, and a scene developing. If we keep the rents low, we'll be okay. More questions? Yes. Andy.
I was really taken with the bravado you all showed when you were asked about external pressures being brought to bear on you. Let me give you time to reconsider that. Let's say I'm doing a show. I'm doing a great group show. I have the subtitle so far put together. I don't think I know. I have the subtitle put together. It's.
I'd like to hear what you're saying.
I have so far have the so far I have the subtitle of the show. I'm thinking about it now. It's pedophile or pervert, epileptic or delusional. And I think the title of the whole show is going to be Visions of Mohammed. Now, when you're confronted with a situation like that, assuming, would you be able to review a show like that if I were able to do it before my gallery was bombed? There have
No,
to be.
Andy, it's go for it, man. Go for it.
I'm serious. There have to be external pressures on you that you're not willing to acknowledge. It may not be your editor. It may be something personal that prevents you. I know this is a simple example, Doug, but I remember on a couple of occasions when you've wanted a photograph from something for the show that you were going to be generous enough to run in the paper, and I'd send you something that had a boob or, God forbid, a penis that was there, and you said, oh, hey, Andy, that won't work. So there are pressures of all sorts that are on you that maybe you've gotten so used to that you've forgotten that there are pressures on you.
No, I mean, it's a difference in like what you can show and what you can write. You can mention body parts. You can mention body parts, in words. But, the good Catholic owners of Gambit, they're not going to go for too much of that. I think there's they all have, all the newspapers have their own little standards of measure of how much you can show. Like in Gambit, it's pubic hair. You can't do pubic hair. You can do tits occasionally, but in a subdued way. No pubic hair. Does that answer your question?
No, because I really want to know if there are any political, in the generic Greek sense of that word, are there any political pressures that either you bring personally to bear on whatever it is you decide to review, or are you indeed free of that sort of pressure?
If you're asking if people are capable of total objectivity, are you crazy? Of course not. Everybody has their own perspective of what is decent, what is worthwhile, and so forth.
But what about politic? I mean, stick to that word. If it's not politic.
Politics?
Yeah, if it's not politic.
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 What do you mean by that?
I mean that it's politically, something's politically incorrect. Would you be prepared to write a review of a show devoted to cartoons of Mohammed?
Oh, sure.
Good. Get ready.
I don't think it's a good idea, but you could write about how it's a bad idea.